The Connection Show. Inspiring hope, health, healing, connecting the dots of your story and transforming your life. Sponsored by BraveHeart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds.
Well, thanks for joining the Connection Show today to inspire hope, health, and healing in the world. And I have a fabulous guest with me today who I haven't seen since November from Florida, my good friend, General Michael Flynn. Welcome to the show, General Flynn.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate you and your audience and everything that you are doing and to help save this country. Thank you.
Well, I am honored to be a friend of yours and to just have the cause of saving America be spread around the world. And I'd love the audience to get to know you a little bit because you have something really special coming up. So, could you take the Connection Show, connecting the dots, the good, the bad, and the ugly, back to little Michael? I don't know if you were called Michael, Mikey, and tell us who you were and what mom was like and dad was like and how it brought you to the amazing man you are today.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I really, I looked at my life as very blessed. I grew up in a large Irish Catholic family, principally up in the northeast of the country, the little state of Rhode Island. I was actually born on a military base. My father was a sergeant in the Army. He was a World War II and Korea vet. He and my mom met in high school and knew each other from high school. And he went off to war, came back from Europe and got married. And my mother, thank God, she decided to have a lot of children. So, and I ended up, I was born at Fort Meade, Maryland, actually, when my father was stationed there in the late 50s. And I actually lived as a child over in Germany for quite a few years. My father was stationed over there, one of his final assignments. And I grew up, up till about the age of 5, really being around him until he ended up retiring from the Army as a sergeant from the Army, and great rank and great man. And then my parents moved back to their hometown, which was Middletown, Newport, Rhode Island. And that's why Rhode Island is a big part of my life. And my brothers and sisters and we ended up growing up principally in the state of Rhode Island in a little town called Middletown, Rhode Island. People can go find it on a map. I always tell people that Rhode Island is the smallest state, but it has 400 miles of beautiful coastline. They call it, it's the Hope State or the Bay Area state. It's beautiful, just beautiful area. And that's where I grew up. And because my father was in the Army and I, as a young child, got used to it, being around the military. And then when we came back to Rhode Island, we had the Navy base there. So as a kid growing up in elementary school and grade school and high school, I ended up going over to the military base quite a bit because we could use the base, we could use the services. I used to go to the gym all the time. I played a lot of basketball. I jokingly say I used to play a lot of basketball against the Swabbies, right? The Navy guy, everybody in the Navy would know that term, Swabbies, anyway, I ended up graduating from my high school class of 1977. Geez, high school in 1977. And I was a good athlete, and we had a lot of fun. I have a lot of friends still to this day that I played various sports with. My wife and I, Lori, we met in high school. We met when we were freshmen in high school, 13 years old. And, with all the little puppy love ups and downs that you go through, we've stuck together. We're almost 40, I think 43 years married now. Been together since like we were little kids, really. I went to the University of Rhode Island, which was a state university. And I got into the ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps program. Excuse me, because I retired as a general. A lot of people always ask me, "Did you go to West Point?" They just assume that I went to West Point, right? I mean, they always ask me that. And I'm a big fan of West Point. Anybody that went to the service academies, but I did not. I ended up going right across the bridge to my state university, a beautiful university called the University of Rhode Island, and they had a great ROTC program. It was cheap, which are inexpensive, right? For me, because we couldn't afford it, and I actually was only going to. I was in my first year, I guess, my freshman year in college. I actually was going to go into the Marine Corps at the end of that first year because I just wasn't I'm not a sit down student. I'm somebody mostly, I really like to get my hands on things. I like to do things. I like to learn by doing instead of learn by sitting and taking tests and stuff like that. Never good like that. But anyway, because I was a good athlete principally, and some of the people in the ROTC department that I got to know, some young sergeants and young officers that were Vietnam veterans, they saw something in me, and one of them came to me the summer that I was about to go into the Marine Corps and said, "Hey, we've had some ROTC scholarships that were turned in." Now, remember, this is 1977, 78 timeframe. Vietnam War had just ended. There wasn't a lot of love for the military, frankly, sadly, at that time. But I loved the military. I loved growing up as a kid. I loved being around my father when he was in his uniform. And I was in that sort of age category with him where I loved it. I just loved the people, right? So I always believed from the time I was a child, this is what I wanted to do. So when I was offered the opportunity to get a scholarship at URI, as long as I battened down on my grades, got my grades up, then the Army would, because I think that they were probably having their own difficulties trying to recruit people, right? I mean, and I was like, wow, what an opportunity, maybe a miracle, who knows? So I took it. My father, helped guide me into it too. I mean, believe me, he wanted me to.
Well, and right after the draft, after Vietnam, nobody, they couldn't get anyone recruited after the Vietnam War. It was like you
Right.
said, when
It was
people
very,
came
very
home.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Very difficult. And I think that also shaped me quite a bit with how I felt about the country too, and how I felt about the military, and I think how the country felt about itself. And I was raised as a kid, like, love of country, love of family. We had a great, like I said, I come from a big family. My family's till this day is still very, very close, tight-knit family. We did go through, when I was a young kid, we went through the tragedy of losing a sister. I lost a sister very tragically, died in a very tragic car accident. Boy, it just makes me emotional just even thinking about it. But, she was in a coma for 6 months. Really, really tough, devastating moments. And difficult time for my parents and us as kids, to have to go through the loss of a child. And in this case, it was our oldest sibling, my sister. We used to call her Lenny. Her name was Helen. Those are all these seminal moments in life that you go through that build who you are and how you treat others, right? I mean, my father always taught us to treat others like you want to be treated. So anyway, I ended up going into the Army through ROTC, through my state university, through growing up as a kid around the Army because my father was retired, again, in World War II, and in Korea. My father spent a lot of time it was, in the whole D-Day, D-Day crowd going into Europe, and then the Korean War. I mean, my father was over in Korea pretty much the entirety of the war. And there was difficult times for him. I wasn't born at the time, but my mother would tell stories about she wasn't sure whether he was going to come home. And we didn't have, cell phone service like we have now where, in a moment's notice, there was months would go by and she'd hear about all this death over in Korea or all the stuff going on, guys getting killed over in Europe.
In general, Flynn, just, I love connecting the dots. So if we can pause for a moment anyway, that's a good place to pause.
Good.
My question is this: I'm now 70, so I graduated high school in 1972, and so
Wow.
I'm a little older than you are, and so I remember definitely the Vietnam War and people coming home. And my husband Larry served in Vietnam. He actually got stationed in Greece. And I lived in San Diego in the 70s, so I was right by the Navy bases, so I know about swabbies, like you had said. So my one
Right.
question, my one question to you is, with your mother having to go through the agony, and I'm going to use the word agony and stress of
And it
her,
was agony. No, it was agony. Agony is the right word.
yeah, and the stress of her husband serving during World War II, because my father served during World War II in the Navy. He was a swabby, and Larry was Coast Guard. And then the loss of your sister and the pain your mother had to go through that. And now her son wanting to follow in the footprints of dad going off to war. Was your mom apprehensive? And I'm sure she loved you in the service, but was she apprehensive of you serving and then going off to the military again with the agony of the possibility of losing you?
Yeah, no, not at all. My mother is like, they taught us to serve. I mean, this was
Okay.
all about, who we were as a family. It was always about service. Service either to country in uniform or service to your community as a civilian, right? I mean, so to speak. I also have my older brother, Billy was also, he served. I have a brother, Charlie, who's still serving. So my life of service, my family's life of service, we go back to when we first came to this country as our family, right? My father's side and my mother's side. So both my grandfathers served in World War I. I have my mother's. You're asking me about my mother. My mother's father served in both World War I and World War II, and so we've had people in my sort of lineage, if you will, serving from World War I. We didn't come to this country until the turn of the previous century as children with the various famines that occurred over in Ireland. We were Irish, and so my grandfathers, my father, my brothers, we've served in every conflict since World War I, and
Wow.
to include up to and including now. And because I have a brother who is still serving, and then when I throw in, the fact that I'm one of 9 kids, my wife is one of 7. We have nephews and nieces and cousins, and we have 100 people at least. And so we have a lot of service to our country in uniform. And so my mother was like, it's a great question. My mother wasn't apprehensive at all. She was very, a point of pride for her. She loved both my parents are deceased now. My mother absolutely loved the military. And that's why my mother, graduating from high school, was her high school valedictorian and salutatorian from her high school class, was given a full scholarship to an Ivy League college at the time. And she said, nope, I love Charlie. I'm going to go marry Charlie, and I want to have a brood of kids. And we're all, all us Flynn's are glad she did, right? Because she's a brilliant woman. She knew what sacrifice was. She knew what it meant. And when I think for her, it was really, she loved when my other siblings married people in the military. I have a couple of sisters who one married a guy in the state police, another married a guy in the Marine Corps, another married a guy in the Navy, right? So I mean, it's like our life is all about service to country. So when I fast forward and I think about all the things that I've had to go through in this persecution that I went through, I mean, nobody really understood that. Nobody cared about that. They didn't ask questions about that. They wouldn't tell that side of who Mike Flynn is, and I think that that's a shame to a degree. And I think when people really do their research so I really do appreciate you asking me about these kinds of things, because I love to, when I would be in the military, when I was in the military as a leader and as a commander, and I had a new soldier, principally soldiers, come into my unit, whether it was a new officer or whether it was a new private, and I met them, the first thing I would ask them is exactly what you asked me, Jill, is I would ask them, what's your story? I wanted to know who that person was before I started to rely on them to do stuff. I wanted to know what made them tick. And, and that's what makes me tick. My family is a big, big part of what makes me tick. And,
Well, and
I
talk
think, that,
and you sharing about your background and your mom and being Irish Catholic. I was raised Catholic as well, and and your mom having so many people in the military, I can just imagine her. I mean, in my mind, I can see your mom as, and I could be wrong here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can see your mom as the first thing in the morning when she'd wake up, she'd have calluses on those knees to hit that floor with the rosary, praying, Father God,
Exactly.
put your hand over Charlie, put your hand over Michael
Right.
today. And in the name of Jesus, sprinkle the blood over him and keep the angel of death away from my children. And so I could see
Yeah.
your mom as a strong Catholic warrior, and her military service was the foothills uh, of the cross, praying diligently for her family. Is that a
Yeah.
description of mom?
Yeah, that's so beautifully stated. And I will tell you that when we lost my sister, Lenny, my mother was she was like the binding of a book of a large family. My mother was the binding that kept our family together, because when things like that, when tragedies like that happen in families, that can really cause a lot of turmoil. I mean, it can cause, there's pangs of guilt, there's stress, there's depression, there's everything that comes with that. And then we're talking 6 months in a coma that my parents had to every single day. I know my mother, and talk about praying. But what it did was, it actually, in a really spiritual way, it strengthened our family. It brought
Yeah.
us closer together. It didn't cause us to tear apart and everybody go off in different ways. And to this day, I'm talking about it with you, Jill. To this day, that is one of the fabrics that stayed very tightly wound in that binding that my mother created for our family, that kept us together. And it does go back to her understanding as a child growing up with her own father, who was a Navy, United States Navy was my grandfather, who served in World War I, served in World War II. She was a child of a long servant of this country in uniform. Her father, my grandfather, served just over 40 years in the Navy, and tremendous guy. And then her brother also served in the Navy, and he ended up having 12 children. And I think four of those graduated from the United States Naval Academy, as well as my uncle, who also served in World War II. So, I mean, my mother was like a really, she's talk about a rock, and that's what I think that's really important for people to understand about me, because, I say a lot of things out there today, and I'm fighting for this country, because that's all I know. Actually, it's all I know. That's what I know,
Well,
and that's what I do best.
well, if we could pause for just a moment, because I know you have another interview after me, so I want to make sure we get in one thing. So thank you for that. And one of the things too that I can say, and then I'd like to divert for a moment because of something that's coming up in your life I want to share. And so one of the things I can say personally, because I traveled with the Reawaken America Tour as a podcaster and saw you in about 7 cities, and really got to hear you and see you on stage, General Flynn. And for me, as an outsider looking in, that's how I would say it, like connecting the dots. What I saw of you more than anything on stage was a godly man, God-fearing man with a sensitive heart that I believe came from your mom. I do believe that. And what I saw from you on stage is the Bible verse that says, train up your children in the way they should go. And when they grow old, they won't depart from it. So what I saw in you on stage was this manifestation of a mom who loved God with all of her heart, who trained up her children in the way they should go. And so what I saw of you was this gentle spirit who still knew how to fight and who loves our nation. But what I saw mostly is how much you love children and people. And so I want to pause with that so people hear that. And then I want to take a break for a moment. And I know you're going to want to say something, but hold that thought. I want to show your bio so the audience can see it. This is General Flynn's bio and the website of how to reach out to him. And I'd like to pause for a moment and show you. First, I'll come back on with him on the screen. So General Flynn felt led to create a documentary so the world can see the truth of what's gone on in his life. We've given a snippet of him, but he's finished this documentary, and it's called Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. So, General Flynn, I'd like to pause for 60 seconds and show a trailer of this new documentary.
Please.
Sounds rolling. All 3 cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Deliver the truth, whatever the cost. That's General Flynn. And as you can see from that trailer, he really shines and shares with you the truth of what's going on. And General Flynn, I am just honored to get to know you. And like I said, you have such a gentle spirit. You're one of the kindest men that I've ever met, to be honest with you. You really are, and have such a heart. You know, one thing about you that really touched my heart, General Flynn, I've come from a long family of PTSD and trauma in my life. And I went through a period where, you know, my mom had a lot of issues in her life growing up herself. And so when I was born, unfortunately, she was going through a lot of borderline personality stuff. And so her words to me growing up is, Jill, you're double ugly. There's nothing good about you. Who'd ever want you? And so my burden in life, connecting my dots, is that no one ever sees me and cares about me. The one thing I've always loved about you is every single time we traveled, you'd say, hi, Jill, how are you? And you remembered my name. And that may not be significant maybe to you, but you have no idea how it touched my heart, General Flynn.
Well, Jill, I tell you, I always tell people, because you're making me do it right now, you know, don't ever take, or don't ever see someone's tears as a sign of weakness. You know, look at tears as a sign of determination. And I think that people need to, I want everybody to understand that about me and about people like you. We all, you know, we all want to have a connection to other people. And I think that's why I went into the military, to be honest with you, because I as a kid, I always saw myself as a sort of a ruffian, and as an athlete, but I loved being around people. I loved being a leader. I love being a team leader. I love being, you know, the person who other people wanted to be. But I always took it as a very humbling sense of duty, you know, to respect other people. My mother taught me a lot about, you know, I have 4 sisters and 4 brothers, so that's where the 9 come from, plus me, right? And I talked about the loss of my sister. The strength of my father, though, one thing that he always taught us was respecting others. And his big thing was the golden rule, right? And it just seems so simple, right? I remember my father telling us, and my mother reemphasizing it and enforcing these things. To be successful in life, you know, it takes teaching a child things like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, please. I mean, just simple things. And we have lost sight of those things. And I think we're in a place now where, God, there's so much divisiveness. and there are some intentional things occurring to cause that. And I do believe that the faith of who we are can strengthen us, but we've got to go back and seek that faith. We've got to go back and find that faith in ourselves. And sometimes we find it in friends and family. And so I appreciate you saying that, Jill. And just, and having gotten to know you, and I know we'll see each other again here in the not too distant future. But I want everybody to realize that, everybody has value. And let me just finish with this. A woman who I got to know, she's deceased now, actually, and she was a wonderful lady. And I was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and she knew that I was talking about her, and I did not know that she was listening. And I said, a woman with nothing gave me everything. Okay. And I get emotional thinking about her. And I said that. I said, a woman with nothing gave me everything she had. And as soon as I come off, and I was talking about going through this persecution and this woman who had been reaching out to my family and she was giving us whatever she had, right? And she really didn't have much in her life in terms of wealth and resources. As soon as I got off that podcast, my phone rang, and it was her. And I didn't expect it. I didn't know she was listening. I'm just having a conversation, talking about what I had just gone through. And, this is back 4 years ago, maybe. And she calls me up, and I picked up, and she yells at me. He says, "Don't you ever tell me that I have nothing." She goes, "I have God in my life. I have my faith in my life. I have prayers. I can pray if I can't." She used to send me change in an envelope for my legal defense fund, like literally quarters and nickels, and she'd throw a dollar bill in there, and she would throw like a set of rosaries, rosary beads into the envelope. I mean, it's like she's giving me everything, and I'm thinking, and I never met her.
Yeah.
I finally did physically meet her, probably a year after, I got uncoiled from my persecution, right? And I finally met her, gave her a big hug, and we shared a lot of tears, to be honest with you. But I was like, that to me that affirmed in my life that everybody has value.
Yeah, and no matter
Everybody
how
has
much,
value.
and no matter how much we're persecuted,
Right.
and I know we got to do a hard break because you got another interview, but I remember a girl I was in a Bible study with, and her husband and their son had a severe brain injury and was severely sick. And you know what she told me, Dr. Flynn, General Flynn, and it was amazing. She said she woke up every day praying to God that she would have persecution every day, so that God's grace would be sufficient in her life to get through the burden she was carrying. She prayed for persecution so her spirituality would grow even firmer with God. So I want to end with this one thing real quick. I have a flyer, and this is a flyer that says that General Flynn, he's traveling around the country right now, and he's going to be showing this documentary film, and he's coming to Branson, Missouri on April the 11th. And I'm one of his partners, going to be partnering to sell tickets for this, and I have a promo code called BraveHeart. If you use the promo code in Branson only, you'll get a discount on the tickets. So use this code and get your tickets today so that you can meet General Flynn in person, and you'll be able to watch his new documentary. And so I look forward to you coming to Branson to give you a big old hug. And you guys listening, please get those tickets today, and let's support General Flynn, and mainly to get the word out. I've never known General Flynn to be a man that wants you to pay a ticket because he wants to fill his pocket. Keep in mind, he wants you to come so you hear the story and know the truth. And so much of the truth is being distorted. So come get your tickets today and meet General Flynn. General Flynn, don't hang up when I push stop, but everyone, will see you in Branson. God bless you, General Flynn.
God bless you, Jill. Thank you. Can't wait to see you.
Thanks so much.